Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I'm the head of news for the Cradle. As usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. Now, before we get started, again, I want to thank you for subscribing, for liking, for sharing this video, and I want to direct you to our Patreon page where you can join, you can subscribe, and help the Cradle grow. We keep seeing the comments about having to do more shows per week, given the amount of news that there is. We agree with you. We would love to do more of these episodes every week, but we need your support. We need this channel to grow. We need this channel to thrive. And we also need more people to come and join our Patreon. As soon as we monetize this channel, you will be the first to know. And now, on with the show. So as we are recording this, we are still waiting for the resistance retaliation to the Israeli twin strikes in Tehran and Beirut. It's been, we're going on close to 2 weeks at this point-ish, because it happened on a Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken.
I feel like it's 4 weeks.
I feel it's 2 years.
And it does feel like a long time, but I do believe it's only been 2 weeks. The statements have been coming, the U.S.-Israeli intelligence reports have been coming, 24 to 48 hours to 72 hours. It's going to be on the weekend. It's going to be on Sunday. It's going to be whatever. Now it's like they just are giving out any date at any point. It's supposed to be tonight. Now, who knows? The only people who know are the ones who are going to give the go-ahead, the green light. And they, of course, have not let anything slip, as, of course, they shouldn't. So Israel is just kind of stewing in its juices, right? People are freaking out. And the U.S. has pledged more weaponry, as they are wont to do, right? They are just deploying now a new submarine. They're telling they are
$3.5 billion they just released?
Yes, they released $3.5 billion in weapons. I mean, this is so interesting to me, right? Because they say, oh, here's $3.5 billion that you can spend buying U.S. weapons. It's like when you go to these places, you need to buy tickets to get like food or to get like prices or stuff.
Yeah.
It's like your money is not worth it. Like, it's so strange because it's like the U.S. government just kind of telling already the U.S. weapon companies, like, hey, by the way, you're about to get $3.5 billion, let's celebrate. And at the same time, obviously, the horrific situation in Gaza, which we'll get into in a bit, the most recent massacre. But before we get into all of that, what is the latest on the escalation?
I mean, it's not just Israel stewing its juices. I have been stewing my juices. I think a lot of people in Lebanon are just... half of Lebanon is like, oh my God, take cover. And the other half is, bring it. When is this happening? So last week, the retaliation talk took a bit of a turn. Suddenly we were hearing things about there not being a retaliation, that Iran's backed down, that Iran has struck a deal, that Iran, from Arab voices, that Iran is not going to defend Palestine, that Iran is now using, Iran and its allies are now using its old language of we reserve the right to strike back at the right time in the right place, which I think made a lot of people think that there was, a turnaround in the situation, even though in Iran, anyone you called was like, nope, we're not hearing any of this. Our leaders have all said what they're going to say, which is we're going to retaliate, and that's that. But you couldn't help be, sort of moved by the new discourse that was taking place. Then Monday comes, today, Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, deployed the USS Georgia, which is a nuclear-powered guided missile submarine, into the region. And he did so after speaking to his Israeli counterpart, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who today said Iran is making military preparations for a strike on Israel like we've never seen before. Of course, how do you take these words seriously? These people have flip-flopped on their language, promised us strikes to come within the next 24 hours, so consistently over the period of the last few weeks that there's really nothing you can take for granted in any of their comments. But, at the same time, we have the retaliation, we assume, is coming. We see that Iran is doing preparations that we didn't see in the first strike, even though that also took an equal period of time before a strike took place, a retaliatory strike took place. In this case, their army, their militaries are doing land maneuvers, running drills, what does that mean? Are we talking about an infiltration of the border, a land infiltration? Who knows? Or maybe it's in preparation for what they expect in retaliation from Israel and its allies. It's unclear, really, but they are making movements, taking actions. The Iranians are that we have not seen before, at least not, in the April strikes. At the same time, we get these kind of comments as the Americans are sending in fighter jets and nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers. We heard the Fifth Fleet commander, so that's the U.S. Fifth Fleet based in the Persian Gulf. The commander said, we cannot deter Ansarullah militarily. We cannot stop Yemen militarily.
He said, let me just read you very quick. He said the solution is not going to come at the end of a weapon.
No, which means, the military guys are telling their civilian counterparts, what happened to diplomacy? You have to strike a deal here. This is never ending,
This is going to be forever.
It's going to be forever, and we're the targets, But, the resistance axis forces show no sign of deterrence by all these threats, all these promises, all these maneuvers, all the major military hardware coming into the region. I mean, if you remember the first weeks of the war, Hezbollah didn't seem remotely deterred by the two U.S. aircraft carriers that came into the Mediterranean. They even said, maybe we can strike them.
We have more targets.
Yeah, and that was the beginning of the war, and they escalate. They continue. There's nothing that seems to push these guys back because, as you mentioned in the podcast last week, Ken, is that the U.S. and Israel have zero defenses against a Hezbollah projectile coming in from just 60 kilometers away. And then just sort of a little bit on the geopolitical front, as all this is boiling, right, really boiling, and as you said, people are steaming in their juices, there's a Ukrainian thrust into Russian territory.
The plan that they hit.
Yes, not just the plan that they hit. They advanced 30 kilometers inside Kursk, which is in Russia, which was a bit of a shocker. I mean, the Russians are now countering this, but why provoke the Russian bear? Why poke the Russian bear when Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, has said really clearly just not that long ago that we are going to militarily assist U.S. adversaries, period. And this comes on the back of now over a week, 10 days of what looks like a ton of Russian aircraft flying into Iran, ostensibly to provide air defenses or to support Iran's air defense capabilities, or perhaps provide different kinds of munitions, as Iran reportedly did during Russia's war with Ukraine. So, and now they provoke the Russians in another theater. I mean, it's like they're trying to poke at everybody, hoping one of these will make an impact and the resistance axis retaliation will not come. It's not possible. They're just making it happen.
So, Karim, I actually did want to get your thoughts on something Charmaine mentioned, and that is the visit by the Russian defense commander to Iran, which the timing of which was kind of interesting. So, tell me, Karim, about this meeting.
So, last time when Iran retaliated after Israel bombing its consulate in Syria, they retaliated, I think, within two weeks, but they didn't make any drills, and they didn't receive the head of the Security Council of Russia. And also the Belarusian Air Force chief went to Tehran. And we know these two countries are friends with Iran. And they have also the knowledge and the experience because what happened in Ukraine, of course, Ukraine fought with Western weapons. And now saying fights also with Western weapons. And of course, there's many reports came out from Iran and from Russia saying that there were the deliveries of defense systems to Tehran, and this shows that the retaliation that will come from Tehran is much bigger than what happened previously, because they needed the experience, the expertise of the Russians and the Belarusians, and they also made drills prior to their attacks. And still the attack, we don't know it will occur, but I think it will be very strong. And the West, of course, led by the United States, they will try to do something. So Iran wants to be prepared before it retaliates.
But, for something I also want to mention very quickly is that overnight we saw this attack by Hezbollah on this new army base in the north of Israel. And it was very interesting to see the amount of missiles that got through. I think they were just rockets, right? I think they said they were Katyusha rockets. But it was just like it was like lit up like fireworks, because in general you see these explosions in the sky. This time it wasn't in the sky. This time they were hitting. So we know from the Majd al-Shams incident and from before that the Israeli Iron Dome is not something that can be relied upon as much as they would like the world to believe. Yesterday, I think we got more evidence of that. And now you have the Russians kind of coming into Iran and being like, okay, we'll help you with the defense systems or whatever, or maybe the strategy, maybe the way the attack will be launched. What are Israel's hopes with this retaliation if Hezbollah with Katyusha rockets can get through the Iron Dome?
Well, I mean, over here we thought, this is the start of a multi-front retaliation, because I think it's not just this one. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen a number of kind of new types of Hezbollah attacks. As I mentioned earlier, there's no real, you cannot retaliate against something that is that close in proximity, distance-wise. You can't even gear your defense systems in the right place, in the right direction, before a strike comes in. And, Hezbollah has spent 10 months now practicing, right? Target practicing and gaining experience as to how Israel's likely to react, where it has holes. Taking out Israel's eyes and ears, its radar, its reconnaissance capabilities, surveillance capabilities, all around the border, deeper and deeper into Israeli territory. So Israel neither has its eyes and ears, nor does it have air defense systems that can intercept any kind of major salvo, missile salvo or drone salvo from Hezbollah. We're seeing this increasingly. We're seeing Hezbollah drones hovering over the beaches in Tel Aviv, and nobody shoots it down. And half the time they do try to shoot it down, they use a $50,000 single Iron Dome projectile, which then falls back on some Israeli settler's head and kills them. By the way, just interestingly, we are going to have a feature article and analysis on the heap of metal that Israel calls the Iron Dome, and really what Israel's state-of-the-art defense system actually is. So make sure to look out for that.
Okay, so another thing that happened as we are waiting for the retaliation is, I don't think actually, because again, this feels like it's been 2 years at this point. I don't think we got to discuss this last week, and it was like the naming of Yahya Sinwar as the new Secretary General of the Politburo chief of Hamas. Obviously, Yahya Sinwar, the close ally of the Qassam Brigades, one of the masterminds of the October 7 attacks, long-time resistance icon. And what I want to get at is what the statement that Hamas put out last night. Because, as you were saying, Charmaine, that there's been kind of like this diplomatic push and like the media push of like, will Iran attack? Will Iran don't attack? They are no longer going to attack. No, yes, they are. Now, one of the main things was like, if we reach a ceasefire in Gaza, maybe we can convince Iran not to attack. So all of a sudden, you saw the U.S. kind of, again, do this whole push of like that we've seen so many times over the past 10 months of like, this week we need to reach a ceasefire. And there were scheduled talks for this week, for later on in the week. And
it's like the Israelis haven't said yes yet.
I mean, they haven't said yes to anything, really. But then last night, Hamas puts out this statement in which they say, what we need is for the implementation of a proposal that was already agreed upon on July 2nd that was presented by Joe Biden. And they say, instead of doing more rounds of negotiations, that provide cover for the occupation aggression and give it more time to perpetuate the war of genocide against our people. The timing of this not only tied to the retaliation and the diplomatic push, but also to the massacre in the Fajr school in Gaza City, if I'm not mistaken. That saw 100 worshippers literally torn to shreds, to the point in which the reports are saying that the families are only receiving bags of 70 kilos of body of human remains that count as a body. Maybe it wasn't even your family, but this is what we were able to recover. It's undescribable at this point what's happening, really. So when you take this statement from Hamas and saying we will not take part in these talks because they are providing cover for this type of atrocities, how can you deny that after everything that we have seen? And also, where does that leave the Western diplomatic push of no, we need to reach a ceasefire in Gaza in order for Iran not to retaliate?
Well, everybody understands what the ceasefire talks push is over. It's to stop a resistance axis retaliation. That's why it's not easy to take them seriously. I mean, today we had a statement from the leaders of France, Germany, the United Kingdom, urging all parties to take up the offer of Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. To hold talks this week and Thursday. I mean, it goes on to do some major political spin in that, we call on Iran and its allies to refrain from attacks that would jeopardize these talks, as though Israel's assassination of a chief negotiator and the head of Hamas's political bureau, in these talks, Ismail Haniyeh, was not jeopardizing the talks, as though the, killing of Hezbollah's military commander was not jeopardizing these talks.
In the capital.
Yeah, none of these were condemned by France, Germany, the United Kingdom, none. And yet Iran and its allies are jeopardizing these talks. And then they say Iran and its allies will therefore bear the responsibility if the negotiations collapse, meaning Iran and its allies should bear the responsibility from Gaza. Yesterday I saw statements, I really don't remember at this point, these reports are just, who are they from, who are the sources, but I saw a report saying that, Palestinians would be really upset by an Iranian retaliation and a retaliation by Hezbollah because that would jeopardize their potential ceasefire in Gaza, which is just insane because, there's something important we should discuss about the ceasefire while everybody, including the leaders of Germany, the UK, and France, are trying to place blame on the resistance axis side and always Hamas, right? The Americans always want to blame Hamas. There's real reason to not just think, to know that the major holdup to any kind of ceasefire is the Israeli government, not just the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, because whoever replaces him, even if it is, a U.S. favorite, they will have to deal with the crazies well, they're all crazy, but the extremists in the government, in the country, on the issue of a ceasefire, right? Because Haaretz today tweeted that diplomatic sources have told the outlet that it has been clarified to Netanyahu that the Biden administration is reaching the point where his behavior would result in the White House publicly accusing him of preventing the release of the hostages. Biden's pissed. And we did hear mention of this after his Netanyahu returned back from his American tour, right? We did hear little leaks here and there that Biden is quite upset with him, and people in
bullshit.
and people in the region were like, no, it's not true. And I think Iran and the resistance axis largely says, no, all of this is okayed by the Americans. The assassinations were greenlit by the Americans, which actually could be the case. But in an earlier podcast, I questioned that because we talked about Israel's mad strategy. We've written a piece on this. You have to go read it. It's on our site from, I think, a week ago. So it's called Israel's Not Crazy. It's just mad. It's a strategy in which Israel very calculatingly, okay, so if you're calculating, you're rational, you're not crazy, so very calculatingly provokes an ally at a time in which the ally cannot respond, and therefore Israel gets away with bad behavior, okay? So Israel gets 84 standing ovations. How much was it? Like some 80 to 81 standing ovations from Congress. And Biden says, to him, like, let's back down from Gaza. It's making us all look bad. Even candidate Trump, U.S. presidential candidate Trump said, Israel, the stuff you're doing makes you look bad. So
they care so much about PR and optics. That's what they care about.
No, apparently not anymore. The cat's out of the bag, as the Washington Post said in their headline today. What was it? It was so bad.
They keep saying the quiet part out loud. Like Israeli leaders keep saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, like basically saying that forget that Israel is an insane genocidal state. They shouldn't say that quiet part out loud. So, anyways, the point going back to this, which I completely forgot. Oh yeah, is that Netanyahu was just as likely to have left the U.S. with an angry White House, come back and thought, well, what's Joe Biden going to say? He's never going to publicly slam me or Israel or our military assault on Gaza. So I'm going to now escalate it because I need the U.S. to come more on side. I want more military support. I want U.S. troops on the ground. I want more U.S. aircraft carriers. I want more U.S. F-35s in the air. I want nuclear-powered submarines in the waters. And so what I'm going to do is kill two prime resistance axis leaders. Okay? Now, why? So the Nation, I was just reading today, but this has been reported a bit, says in an article that Biden realized that Netanyahu was lying to him about the hostages. And this is from a senior White House official admitting to Haaretz last week. The official was referring to Biden's speech on May 31st, in which he laid out what he said was an Israeli-approved plan for a Gaza ceasefire and a hostage release. Now, don't forget, like from the beginning, this last plan after May, right, in June, was an American plan that the Americans explicitly said was Israeli-approved. And the Israelis have tried to reject it. To bring things into context, Hamas has not rejected these talks on Thursday. Hamas has said, well, there's nothing more to add to it because the goalposts keep changing. What we need to just tell you is we accept the Biden plan. Now, Hamas is saying openly, we accept the American plan, right? It's for the Israelis to reject it now. They don't have to show up on Thursday to this ridiculous meeting, right? They're just saying, we accept it. We accept it. Now, it's your plan. You said it was Israeli approved. Let's go forward with that.
But now we're seeing, as you're saying, that it's constantly, well, this has been the case for the past 10 months and probably for the past 76 years. It's always the...
And then, so the article says that he's not saying it yet, but in the meeting between Biden and Netanyahu, he specifically told him, stop bullshitting me, right? The famous words. The White House official then charges, quote, Netanyahu is trying to prolong the war instead of focusing on how to get a hostage deal. It's making it harder for us to continue supporting Israel over time. And this was an extraordinary series of admissions from the White House. I think they were like little test balloons to see how Israel would handle this and how far they could push this narrative that Israel was the culprit in ceasefire breakdown talks, right? And then now, today, Haaretz saying Biden is reaching a breaking point and may just come out and publicly accuse Netanyahu of preventing the release of Israeli hostages.
Yeah, so what I just wanted to say was, because Israel has kind of gone completely, mad over the past couple of weeks, more than before, because over the past few weeks, much more rogue, yes. Yeah. We've seen, this attack, we've seen the accusations of gang rape, their accounts of systemic rape in prisons. Worse than that, we have seen the defense of that. The public defense of Palestinians shouldn't be raped. Israelis do have the right to rape Palestinians. This is what they are saying. They're saying it in protest. They're saying it on TV. you have one of the soldiers accused
The main rapist.
of sodomizing these one of these Palestinians, coming out on social media, and like asking for the Israelis to come and like unveiling his face and calling for like the Israeli population to
That was
come
the
to
weirdest optic I have seen in a long time, because the main rapist, the main culprit, pulls off his mask because he's been kind of is the balaclava that he's been wearing on TV shows and stuff to protect his identity. He takes it off as he's talking to the camera and slaps on a kippah. Like, I'm a Jew. Do not accuse me of rape, otherwise you're anti-Semitic.
And
What was that?
That's one thing. Again, because there's many. There's a Smotrich coming out and saying, we are justified in starving 2 million people, but the world wouldn't like that. Then, these are his words.
And now the WHO also sent 1 million polio vaccines to Gaza because there were warnings by health experts that there is a polio epidemic about to, unleash on the strip, and Israel will not let those vaccines in, none of them, while in advance of this, Israel has made sure to vaccinate for polio every one of its soldier terrorists operating inside the Gaza Strip.
So, and just to get back to the Fajr school massacre, in one of the most disgusting moves that we have seen up to this point by the Israeli government, they massacre 100 people, and then they come out hours later with, first of all, this statement in which they say, they're exaggerating the people in Gaza. We didn't kill 100 people. Our intelligence doesn't show that. And then they put out this thing saying terrorists eliminated in the military headquarters located in the mosque area. Because, by the way, this happened during dawn prayers. So the people were praying at like 4 or 5 in the morning, something like that. And they name...
it's when terrorists, a.k.a. Muslims, amass.
Yeah. So they name, there's this image, in which they name all of these terrorists. They say eliminated. There's a bunch of children. There's an imam. There's like a bunch of just civilians that they are claiming are terrorists, and this is their justification for tearing to shreds over 100 people.
Yeah, and people got on... So the Cradle did an article about this, identifying through social media and other sources who these people actually were. And there were, people who jumped on social media saying, hang on, three of them were members of my family. They were, a teacher or this or that.
Certainly.
And they had
University professor. Exactly.
University professor, nothing to do with the military, nothing to do with resistance. And so very, very quickly, Israel's claims were quashed. I mean, they can't even tell Western media how many of those killed in Gaza in the last 10 months were civilians. They don't even have the numbers, but they can immediately identify 19 so-called terrorists, in prayers. How did they identify that?
And the worst out of all of this is that no government, no Western government, no Western media outlet has come out and questioned this. They just take it at face value. You must have seen the Reuters headlines that changed through the day, that it started with the Israeli strike, then it changed to Gaza and say, and then it changed to something even more vague. And that this is just being the case every single day.
I mean, you could do a book on these Western media headlines that change from single outlets that change over the course and development of a crisis in order to make themselves look right, or in response to people's criticism. Never mention Israel. Palestinians just die naturally. None of them get killed, and the perpetrator is never Israel. So
they just have a tendency to get in the way of bullets.
Yeah.
This is how it's reported. It's just, there's no words to describe what this is. Do we want to say anything else about what they did this stuff at the school?
Of course, it was deliberate, because previously when they killed, when they assassinated Aruri in Beirut, they only killed him. And we can see that Haniya and Tehran, he was the only one killed. So, and Gaza is surrounded by Israelis and by intelligence, by planes. So if they want to eliminate a terrorist, they can eliminate him alone. Why to kill 100 people with them? But Bashar means that Netanyahu always is finding something or doing something to stop the negotiation process.
So you mean they're deliberately killing civilians, Ken?
Yeah, I don't know if they will censor me. But yes, they are, unfortunately.
No, but it's so true. It's like,
I know.
Something to know. They could actually kill a target.
Yeah.
Okay?
in another country.
But right there in an area they occupy, they constantly miss, right? 21 out of 24 Hamas battalions 10 months later are still fully intact and operational, okay?
Yes.
So who are they killing? Who are these 40,000 plus? Let's be honest, like we're talking more like 140,000 plus right now, you know? How is this targeted anything? They have no intelligence. Actually, that's probably not true. They have intelligence. We also have to remember, I said this from the beginning of the conflict, I said anyone killed in Gaza is a deliberate policy of killing civilians because the Israelis know, like you know, that Hamas has tunnels, Hamas has places in which to take cover while the enemy is engaging, you know, in their territories, in their cities, in their towns. So anyone that Israel targets is a civilian.
So, you know, I feel like, sadly, we haven't seen the end of this, even with the retaliation coming. It's going to be there doesn't seem to be a way out of this. We're seeing this refusal for a ceasefire from the Israelis, and we're seeing, you know, the complete cover that the West just continues to provide. It's just like, with no question, with no regard, with no interest. You know, people may protest, people may say whatever, but the leaders, they don't care.
Well, this is why this retaliation is so important.
Yes.
And maybe this is why Iran is taking its time and doing things it's not done before and working with others like Belarus and Russia. And it's, you know, Iran did the April retaliation all by itself. In this case, it will do it with the entire axis, right? Hezbollah, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen. Yeah. So here's why this is important. We've often said before that the resistance axis benefits from a slow, drawn-out war with Israel, because slowly depleting Israel, boiling the frog, as we've often said, over a period of months and years, right? But in this case, you know, people are dying every day in Gaza. They have tried. The resistance axis has tried to do what it takes to reach a ceasefire. Okay, Hamas has looked at every Israeli proposal and worked with it until now. Okay, the Iranians have consistently said, we do not want to escalate. We do not want this to be a regional war. So have Hezbollah. And yet we're where we are now. It may take a strike the likes of which Israel has never experienced for several things to happen. One, for the Israeli people to have a shock. Okay, don't forget, most of the Israelis under the age of 30 have never seen anything like this. Okay, so and not participate in wars, right? To give the Israeli public a shock like they've never experienced, many of whom will leave, but also to show that in a massive, unprecedented military response hit and strike on Israel, the U.S. cannot do anything. If the U.S. does not react in the way Israel would love it to, troops on the ground, bombing Iran, bombing Lebanon, etc., it's over. That means they've maxed out their preparedness to aid in this. And then Israel's on a very dangerous slippery slope, which is why this retaliation must be severe. It must be a gut punch to Israel and to the United States.
To the entire West.
Because ultimately it is the United States fighting this war against Iran, fighting a war against a global South country that has chosen an independent way and self-sufficiencies over being a vassal state. Okay, so this should be decisive. It doesn't mean Israel will not continue to punch at Gaza, because it's always used it as a punching bag. You know, it's low-hanging fruit. But it means that the whole idea that Israel is in control of these things has gone forever. People will understand it's over. There's nothing militarily Israel and its allies, particularly the United States, can do in the face of a concerted resistance axis counter on Israel.
And especially at these times, because before October 7, we know that the United States was trying to counter Russia and to counter China, and they wanted to stay the number one in the world. So what's happening now is that Netanyahu and Israel is dragging the United States to this war to this region, and this will make the Chinese more stronger because they are not currently in any war. They will be able to establish more presence in the South China Sea.
Yeah, they'll send their Olympic-winning swimmers to defeat the American submarines, dude.
Yeah, 100%. So that's what I want to say, that first we saw that what happened in Ukraine. We said this might be the catalyst of the downfall of the West. And what's happening now with Israel make us be 100% certain that the whole West will collapse.
Yeah.
Maybe it will collapse overnight because we're seeing what's happening in the stock markets in the West and especially in the United States. And now they are still sending weapons, and they have this whole homeless crisis, and people, they can't pay their rent and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of things. The defense minister said that he's going to send all these military airplanes and the Navy and submarines and many things. Overnight, now we are seeing them, they are coming to the region. While anything that's happening domestically is being ignored. And this is one of the things that we know that the big downfall is approaching.
But Kamala Harris brings so much joy to voters' heart, Karim.
I know. It brings to me also, when I see her laugh, also my day is...
Caco. So, Esteban, what happens, in your view, if massive strike happens against Israel and the U.S. does nothing? The U.S. military, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Air Force does nothing.
Oh, that's like the dream, isn't it? I guess, like for in the sense of putting an end to the carnage in Gaza, right? Because as long as the U.S. stands on the side of Israel, the carnage is going to continue. At the moment that the U.S. will make a human decision, which, let's be honest, it's not going to happen because history tells us otherwise, is the moment in which they are defeated. They're simply going to be defeated. There's no way. They can't take Hamas. They can't take Qassam in Gaza. They cannot take on Hezbollah. They cannot take on Yemen. They just cannot. They're incapable, right? Why are they going to resort to their last card?
What happens to U.S. power projection? I mean, a lot of that is based on psychology, the psychology of the other, We hear this often in the region, but how can you ever beat the U.S.? How can you ever beat Israel, right? I mean, that's quickly diminishing, I have to say. Like, people understand that there is a route to beat the Israelis and the Americans, but how about the Saudis? Well, the Saudis, the U.S. really wants Biden has really wanted normalization of Israel to be one of his legacy pieces.
I think it would be actually beneficial for the U.S. if they at some point say, you know what, we're not going to come into your defense, Israel, after everything you've done. It might actually improve their image. It will improve their standing. It will not make them look strong. Of course it won't. But in the eyes, of the world, it will be like, maybe there is still something to be salvaged there. Because if they continue in the path that they're on, we know that there is not. We know that this is an empire that needs to collapse in order for the rest of us to breathe.
Yeah. But I mean, just to say, like, what happens to the Saudis and the Emiratis overnight, and the Moroccans and the Jordanians. Oh, we have to talk about the Jordanians. The Jordanians, what are they going to do if the U.S. doesn't aid Israel in defense or offense against an Iranian strike with its allies? It's game over. But really, I would pray for this just for many reasons, but just to see King Abdullah's reaction. If the Americans and Israelis go down,
all of these client states to be like, oh, sorry about that, guys. Sorry about the past 76 years.
But all of a sudden he'll start reminding, people, maybe the Muslims, that in fact he is descendant from the Prophet Muhammad, as is Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So they are cousins.
He'll drop the British accent.
Accent, But seriously, Jordan in this, right? Like, threatening Iran, don't you dare use our airspace or even traverse our airspace. And then really what we know is offering it up, like in April, to the Americans, to the British, to the French, and to the Israelis. And then lying about it, like coming out just a day or two ago. Was it last week or That was yesterday. So Abdullah comes out yesterday and says nobody, can move through our airspace. It's ridiculous. Everybody can. There's nothing you can do about it, But really, he's just threatening Iran. He's threatening the country that is leading the global resistance against the atrocities that Israel is committing in Gaza. And that's who King Abdullah, married to a Palestinian twit, is saying.
I think this is something that, it's nice to think about. I hope someday we see it happen. But I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I don't think it's going to happen in a year, in 2 years.
Stop, guys. The thing is when, the thing about tipping points, okay, is people don't often know when the tipping point is and what a tipping point looks like. But when you hit a tipping point, it's down very quickly.
October 7th wasn't it?
So the reason people talked about decline of American power for even since the 70s is it's true. It's been true. But, losing its manufacturing base to cheaper, more efficient competitors elsewhere, et cetera, since then. But now we're still in the place where we understand this could hemorrhage overnight, but it's about identifying when that tipping point will be. And most people don't have a crystal ball, but we're seeing such an acceleration of the decline of American power projection and threats, really.
On the politicians, we never saw something like this.
It's a circus. I mean, it's Kamala versus Trump. It's ridiculous. They have nobody else.
It's insane.
Whoever voted for Kamala, which primary did he win?
Yeah, and what he win?
She cannot. Joe Biden is more coherent than she is in stringing sentences together. Yeah. I'm really sorry,
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting debate next month between her and Trump. Who can make the more incoherent sentence. But let's move on from this for a bit, because there's one last thing that we should discuss. This is something we touched upon a bit last week, and it's as we are talking about the coming retaliation, there's been kind of an activation of the different fronts, right? I think we saw it with Yemen when they launched their drone in Tel Aviv, although this happened before the Beirut and Tehran attacks. The U.S. bases in Iraq are again getting hit. A bunch of U.S. soldiers got injured a week ago, if I'm not mistaken. But more interesting than all of this is what's happening in Syria. What's happening in the provinces of Hasaka and Deir ez-Zor, where since last year, really since last August, we have seen an uprising by local Arab tribes who are pretty sick of the rule of the Syrian Democratic Forces, who are the proxies of the U.S., the Kurdish proxies of the U.S. in the region, help them control Syria's oil-producing, wheat-producing regions. About a third of the country is under their control. So there's been this uprising for the past year, but over the past week, there was this huge attack, unprecedented. They were just completely took them by surprise, in which the Arab tribes, who, for over the past years, there's been these reports that they are getting the help of the Syrian army. They launched this attack. They take control of a bunch of towns controlled by the SDF. They reached the vicinity of Al Omar oil field, which is one of the occupation bases.
Physical, yeah.
Where they have, the U.S. has another 900 troops in Syria. And now they're fighting back. Like the SDF, the U.S. helicopters are shelling these positions. It's all-out fight. It's impossible, right, to disconnect this from everything else that is happening in the region.
I mean, for sure, let's just say that the Arab tribe issue, okay, which re-erupted in, I think on the 7th of August.
It was something.
It was the biggest assault on the Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, in a year. As you said, the year before this started, and what started as a rebellion against...
Because they captured some Arab tribal, like one of their leaders. I forget, it's been a year.
So it was the SDF's arrest of the Deir ez-Zor military council leader in August 2023 that triggered the tribal uprising. But you're right, it has shifted, and it's gained momentum because you're right, you cannot disconnect with what's happening in Gaza, what's happening throughout the region. I mean, don't forget Arab tribes in the Levant. So the Arab tribes in Syria have family members in the Arab tribes in Iraq, and they have family members of the Arab tribes in Jordan. These are silly lines drawn on a napkin by a Brit and a Frenchman decades ago, Mr. Sykes and Mr. Picot. And but because of what's happening in the region, because resistance is rising up, I mean, really, the Arab tribal rebellion has become a solid resistance operation. There's something I want to quote: the Operation Inherent Resolve, all right, the U.S. so-called Operation anti-ISIS operation, reported in its late 2023 update to the U.S. Congress that tribal fighters have evolved into a full-fledged resistance movement. Now, aligning them absolutely with the Syrian government and the Iranian government is a narrative trick, right?
Yes.
It basically means the U.S. and its Kurdish allies have not been able to co-opt the Arab tribes. If you can't co-opt them, slander them, smear them, undermine them, marginalize them.
But because before this uprising, these Arab tribes were working with the U.S. for a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, the alliances shift very quickly in a war-torn area, right? Who can pay the more, who offers immediate relief, many reasons. But the Arab tribe problem that started at the hands of the U.S.'s Kurdish allies a year ago in Syria and northeastern Syria has now become a full-fledged rebellion. It aligns very much with the resistance axis in, target banks in Iraq, for instance, and Hezbollah, Iran, etc., because the targets have increasingly become U.S. targets. So U.S.-controlled Syrian oil fields, right, or U.S.-occupied Syrian oil fields, U.S.-occupied lands, U.S. military bases. We're seeing an escalation, since the Israelis triggered an escalation a few weeks ago. We're seeing increasing strikes against U.S. military targets in Iraq, which actually was triggered by the U.S. targeting Iraqi resistance groups in the first place. So common cause is developing between the resistance axis and Arab tribes. And because these Arab tribes are connected across borders, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, you're going to find, the thinking of Arab Sunni, right, members of nationals of these three countries, converge with a resistance axis outlook. The U.S. is the enemy. So increasingly we're seeing that the U.S. is the enemy. But guess who's triggering it? It is their Kurdish allies. We have an article today, actually, on the Arab tribes, what happened last week, why it escalated so quickly, how they managed to cut a swathe through Kurdish-occupied territory that used to belong to them and liberate these areas. The Kurds are trying to spin this and say that, no, we're in control of the situation. No, they're not. They're so not in control of the situation that they released hundreds of ISIS fighters last month, okay? In order to, they say, because we didn't have the manpower to watch these detention centers because we had this fight with the Arab tribes. No, they released the ISIS fighters because ISIS is on board the Kurdish American Project. They would help the Kurds fight the Arab tribes. So anyways, we're seeing something very meaningful happening on a local level, okay, with local issues in a corner of Syria, but has absolute ramifications through at least three countries, and then the region, So on top of that, the region is increasingly aware of Washington's goals. So, people were suckered for a long time. Oh, you're Sunni, be on our side. Oh, you're Arab, be on our side. Are now have been able to see clearly what the issues at hand are, who the enemy is, and Washington's goals have become clear to the Arab tribes. Kurds took over Arab territory in Syria, right? And so they understand that the U.S.'s intention is to establish a separatist Kurdish entity and exploit Syria's resources. Now they can see with their own eyes. And the U.S. are also beginning to feel the effects of the Turkish-Syrian rapprochement, which the Russians are very keen to push, right? Because this could spell the end of Kurdish separatist ambitions in northern Syria. So all of these things converging at the same time create, a really possible of a major conflagration on the east coast of Syria.
So, Karim, I want to get your thoughts on this. Well, first of all, on the position of that Sharmin has given, because I see you shaking your head. And second of all, I really do want to get your opinion on this idea of Turkey-Syrian rapprochement. Can we actually get there?
Eventually, we will get there because first they share history, they share culture, they share food, they share money.
Oh my God. Okay, not that stuff counts for squat with Erdogan, who just this week, the Turks have like a laundry list of things that the Syrian government should do before
they wanted to redraft a new constitution.
Yeah, it's our business.
I know, but eventually they will come together with Erdogan or without Erdogan, with Bashar al-Assad or without Bashar al-Assad. And currently, what's happening in Kurdistan, Syria, or what the Kurds are doing in Kurdistan, Syria, will eventually be translated.
There's no such thing as Kurdistan, sir.
There will be.
Okay, so...
Okay, I'm very negative about this because I think what will happen in Syria is the same what happened in Iraq. They will have their own...
No, you don't understand. What happened in Libya didn't happen in Syria because we learned from our mistakes. So what happened in Iraq will never, ever, ever happen in Syria, Turkey, or Iran, where there are large Kurdish minorities, because we saw that, getting a little area that you could call Kurdistan, okay, though not a separate state, was a breeding ground for state enemies to thrive. Israel, the United States bases, intelligence agencies, this is not an extreme corruption and stealing of a country's resources. This will never, never occur in Syria, Iraq, or Syria, Iran, or Turkey.
Okay, in Iran it will not happen, but Syria, I think it's already happening.
Oh.
And I think it's already too late.
And let me ask you, Kurdish separatists in Syria, what chance in hell do they stand when U.S. troops are forced out? The 900 troops that basically stand guard, because everyone's afraid to hit an American except Yemenis. And once they break that down, and there are U.S. bodies everywhere, nobody's going to care anymore.
When this starts, okay, I will be on your side, but currently I think it's too late. They are there since 2013. Now we are in 2024. They are there 11 years. 11 years.
You could tread water for 11 years.
11 years. They created South Korea.
No,
3 years.
No. 11 years, Syria has been in limbo, in the way Lebanon has been in limbo for decades, waiting for a political decision or a switch in authority in the region. It's just one of those things that happen in this region. You know that very well.
Kurdistan, Iraq exists.
Nothing changed. Nothing grew or changed significantly during those 9 years.
Yesterday, the Americans gave the Kurds in Iraq weapons. They gave them vehicles. They gave them armed vehicles. They gave them everything, Shari.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Kurdish separatism in Syria grew under the hands of the Americans. Well, those who wanted a separatist project were brought into the American. Brought into the American armpit and funded and weaponized and given platforms around the world, etc. And the thing is, the regime change never happened. The ability to divide Syria didn't happen. Okay. They occupied this area because they had ISIS depopulate the Syrian Arab areas, and only U.S.-backed Kurds were allowed to so-called liberate it. As we often say, it was conquest masked as liberation. Okay, it was the depopulation of Arabs, 3 million of them in Turkey, who the Americans will not allow back, because then they'll all come to the north of Syria, which is go back to their towns. These are Arab areas, okay? There is a Kurdish minority in these areas. There are only little spots in which there's a Kurdish majority. But these are Arab areas. You think these people are going to live in purgatory and refugee camps in neighboring countries forever? No. When this regional war, this regional confrontation takes place and one side wins, okay, that side is going to determine what happens in the Kurdish occupied areas of Syria, the Kurdish occupied areas of Iraq. Okay, that the victor will determine that.
There's no
And the
occupied,
victor, yeah,
there's
there's
no occupied Kurdish region in Iraq. They have, under the constitution, they have their own language, they have their own flag, they have their own parliament.
They don't have access. They don't have the right to access Iraqi resources.
But they are doing it.
That is occupation. Sorry. It is.
But as I see it, if they continue like this,
Yeah.
that is the access, and the Iraqi government and the Syrians,
I
they
just
say,
see the Kurdistan in Iraq is an Iraqi project. I mean, of course, pushed by the Americans. And I think it will unravel because that area has turned out to be nothing more than a cesspool of corruption.
Oh.
The two major Kurdish parties are always, at war with each other. It's not been a successful operation. It could have been because it has all the support in the world. It has Western countries supporting it militarily, financially. It's stealing Iraq's resources. It's creating pipelines with Turkey. Imagine Turkey and the Kurds cooperating only on money, and yet it's failed. So what are you talking about? Listen, I'll tell you something. All the artificial U.S. and Israeli-backed constructs in this region will collapse the moment the U.S.-Israel project collapses. They are intricately tied with each other. They don't stand a chance without the big U.S. tax behind them. This is not like this is a rational, objective position.
Sharmeen, I'm with you. Not only that, I'm with you that Taiwan will collapse. I'm with you that...
I didn't say anything about Taiwan.
No, I will go further. I will go further because these are entities that were created following World War II because of the power of the United States. Okay? And also we will see the rise of Cuba and other places that were under...
Let's keep...
Okay, let's keep it.
Yeah.
Okay. I have nothing against the Kurds. I have, even in Lebanon, there's Kurds, and I have friends. But, of course, since 20 years, we are hearing that there's a new plan, a new Middle East plan, and they want to divide the countries. Okay? Yes or no?
Correct.
So, and Kurdistan...
They've tried.
They succeeded in Iraq 100%.
Correct, because they had complete hegemony then, and they invaded and occupied the country.
So, I'm a Kurd in Syria. I go and I see Iraq, Kurdistan. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
They have money more than the other places. And my country, Syria, is up, yes, since 10 years. Why wouldn't I fight to make my own region under my own flag in Syria? And the United States is my ally, one of the most powerful countries in the world. And nobody is doing anything against me. Even the Syrian army, the government, nothing. Maximum, we are seeing like negotiation every 8 months. And what's happened? And let's be frank, Arab tribes, what do they have? They have like light weapons. They don't have the power to expel the Kurds that have threat of Syria, and they have weapons, direct weapons from the United States. And the United States, they have 22 sites in eastern Syria, and they have the experience. They can go to any site. They are getting they are being trained there. So, I mean,
do you know
nobody is fighting them? That's my last point. Is now it's more than 11 years. If this continues to another year, you have like one generation who were born under this idea, under this mentality, and nothing can take it out of their heads.
Okay, so let me explain that Israel's been around 76 years, and one event can completely undo 3 or 4 generations. Wait, let me finish.
You interrupt me.
No.
That's not Israel. They came from different places.
Stop.
But Syrian Kurds are there since thousands of years.
That's not true. Syrian Kurds in the northern areas came as refugees from Turkey. Okay, so this is not true. That's not the issue, actually. That's not the the issue. Your argument, I don't even know where to start. Stop.
She can't.
No, because you said so much rubbish. Your argument that because Syrian Kurds, who prior to this, there were no major aspirations as in Iraq, okay, where the Iraqi Kurds had been genocided by Saddam Hussein, okay? There was no impetus in Syria other than demanding some kind of rights, all right? But nothing major, right? It was the Syrian Kurds Kurds in Syria and Iran don't have the same problems or haven't had the same problems as the Kurds in Turkey and Iraq, all right? Let's be honest with that. So there was this major aspiration among Syrian Kurds to have their own country within Syria. But when the war happened, the U.S. came in, and, it's about creating a construct, finding people who will work with you on a separatist project, arming them, financing them, enriching them, okay? Showing them the map that they would create. It's like, but see, these are false constructs, okay? When I say Israel was a false construct. Syrian Kurdistan, okay, is a false American construct. It has no legs other than the barrel of an American gun. There are so many projects like this in the region, including the borders in the Levant. There is nothing keeping those borders intact other than the American gun. So stop with this, 11 years. 11 is nothing. We're talking about centuries. We will take away these Western constructs in this region. And I'm not saying how. I'm not particularly revolutionary about it. I'm saying organically these changes will happen from the region based on where tribes exist, where populations have settled, etc. You cannot, not only is this American construct, but it only lives because 3 million Syrian Arabs are held hostage in Turkey, okay? When those borders are open and they come back in, which the Americans refuse to let this happen, the Kurdish project is over. Do you see what I'm saying? It is completely a construct.
I understand, but I don't see it, Sharmi. What I see is that in the next Olympics, we will see athletes walking and holding the Kurdistan, Iraq.
Does he not see what I'm saying? I
understand, but I don't see.
Listen.
Nobody is fighting them. Nobody is.
You don't need
politics.
You don't need.
I'm not saying by God.
Karim. That time will come when things shift elsewhere.
After 2 generations.
Oh my God! You literally sound like one of these defeatist Arabs.
I'm not defeated.
No,
you know that I'm.
Obviously the Syrian state is under sanctions.
Okay.
Its resources are occupied by
Idlib. It's too late. What will happen in Idlib, Sharmi?
Okay, so it's too late. I covered the Syrian war for a decade. Hold on. And things that people were like, oh my God, this is it at the beginning. A few years later happened. Syria was liberated by and large, mostly, except for the American-dominated parts. And the Syrian army worked with the Russians, etc., to create a little nest of extremists in Idlib only, so they would leave other areas and civilians could return back to their homes. All right? And then this has been kept. These 2 situations have been kept until the political will is there at play. One way to shift political will is to defeat one side. And now the American defeat may or may not be coming with the defeat of Israel.
Okay.
With the victory of Yemen, with the victory of Hezbollah, with the victory in Palestinian resistance, with the victory of Iran, all these things will change things in the region. There are many things in international politics. Border disputes have lasted for hundreds of years, and they stay in limbo until something shifts.
Okay, I think it's a strategic mistake that they stopped the war.
Okay, I'm so bored with this.
Okay.
No, I just can't. I can't.
Yeah, she can.
No, I can't, because how are you, the Arab sitting here, saying things that you know to be otherwise?
Because I read what they say, sure.
You just read the comments of the Cradle where they say they like Sharmeen and Penny arguing.
For those of you that enjoy the argument, you just got your feel. And I think we can.
Won?
He never argues with me off camera.
Tell us in the comments. Tell us in the comments, please. Are you Team Karim? Are you Team Sharmeen? Me in particular, I'm Team The Cradle. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please make sure to like, to subscribe, to share, to check out our Patreon, and to follow us on Telegram, on Instagram, on X for the Cradle News Roundup. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmeen Narwani.